underwriting. SOX promoted this concept of Chinese walls to minimize conflicts of interest that often lead to insider trading between investment bankers and brokers working in a multi-service broker-dealer. Insider trading is the illegal trading of a security based on material non-public information. In a multi-service broker-dealer, the investment banking department usually obtains the material non-public information through its relation with the corporate clients. The investment banker then could share this information with the firm's retail brokers who make trade recommendations to their customers based on this information. For example, a corporate client may disclose to an investment banker that it's going to be making a tender offer for another corporation. The investment banker may then share this inside information with a retail trader who then recommends that his customers purchase shares of the target firm stock. Once the news of the tender offer is released to the public, the client is then able to sell the shares for a profit. This is a classic case of insider trading, and the kind of thing that SOX looks to try to prevent through Chinese walls. Chinese walls are basically just a limit of communication between different groups of people or different departments. Let's look at the medical industry. So the law that is most well known in the medical industry is HIPAA. In 1996, HIPAA, which is also, I guess, technically known as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Law, was endorsed by the U.S. Congress. The HIPAA Privacy Rule, which is also called the Standards for Privacy of Individually Identifiable Health Information, provided the first nationally recognizable regulations for the use and disclosure of an individual's health information. Essentially, the privacy rule defines how covered entities use or can use individually identifiable health information, or the personal health information, PHI. So covered entities are basically any entity that can be, for example, a health plan or a medical insurance provider, right? A healthcare clearinghouse, or an actual healthcare provider, a doctor, a hospital, and so on. The goal of HIPAA is basically to give patients control over the use of their health information, to define boundaries for the use of and disclosure of health records, and establish national level standards for that the healthcare providers have to comply with. Under their privacy rule, there are two approaches to de-identify health information so that it's no longer protected health information. Protected health information under HIPAA is basically individually identifiable health information. So if a doctor discusses with someone else that they have a patient that has cancer, it's perfectly legal. But if they identify who that patient is, it becomes illegal. All right, just very simply put. And the way to identify a patient includes, obviously like the name and the social security number, but they can also include a slew of other factors that I won't cover today because it's really a little boring, but there are many, many things that can identify an individual. So if you're not in the medical industry, just know that you're very well protected by this law. Let's talk about the energy industry. So in the energy industry, there is FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and it requires organizations to record and store any conversations associated with transactions for instant messaging compliance. Specifically, FERC Order 717, the most recent regulation, requires organizations to manage and prevent communications between transmission function employees and marketing function employees. Recent research collected between customer email compliance audits, during customer email compliance audits rather, by a vendor, determined that basically organizations in this industry have successfully formed ethical walls between different employee groups, but they lack policy-specific controls to centrally manage IM exchanges. So without effective IM safeguards in place, these studies basically suggest that organizations are running a pretty big risk of incurring costly penalties in the violation of FERC laws. And the penalty, if you're wondering, it's as much as $1 million a day. So there's definitely a big downside to not following the law if you're in the energy industry. Now, you don't have to be in these industries to really have to watch out how IM is being used. No matter what industry you find yourself in, your company is subject to the U.S. Federal Rules of Civil Procedure numbers 26 to 35. As you might have guessed, these rules govern all civil litigation. So originally, these rules only govern correspondence, and that, of course, meant old-time letters. But no one really sends letters, or not many people send letters these days. So in December of 2006, changes to the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure were made that created a new category for electronic records that may be requested during discovery in legal proceedings, and that was instant messaging. That means that during discovery, any company may be asked for a copy or a description by category and location of all instant messages that the disclosing party has in its possession, custody, or in its control, and may use to support its claims and defenses. In other words, archiving your IMs can help you defend your company. In some cases, you may also be required to show proof that a plaintiff's claim is not true if you already have a policy of retaining communications. Now, let's talk about some surprising statistics regarding the personal use of IM at work, because these actually spread into a whole different area that are not industry-specific regulations. You probably already know instant messaging is not all business at work, but Meta Group has made that official. They actually conducted a survey and found that 57% of the people in their survey, in their study, admitted that they used IM at work for personal reasons. Surprisingly enough, Meta also found that 56% of the respondents in the survey of 300 global organizations use IM at home for business purposes. Now, while employees may not consider personal use of IM at work a major problem, Meta has pointed out businesses should view these numbers as alarming because, in essence, companies are exposed to potential problems on both fronts. When people are trading work for private conversations in the office, or when they are using IM for business outside the control of their employers. When employees use IM for personal reasons while they should be working, it obviously distracts from doing work for the company. However, use of corporate IM during personal hours to communicate with colleagues, partners, and customers is also a liability for the company because their channel of communication is being used. Should an employee say something improper, such as sending improper photos of coworkers, say something racy or even offensive, it will make the company look bad. Whether or not it's illegal, it's still a reflection of the company. Let's see some of these other statistics I failed to. Okay. The research group also found that companies treat IM differently from email and personal use. While only 3% and 5% of companies prohibit personal use of phone and email, respectively, nearly 16% ban the use of IM. In addition, 68% of companies allowed limited use of email for personal reasons, but only 44% had the same rule for IM. Basically, there are different policies for IM as there are for email and phone. And in fact, they're all forms of communication that can land a company in trouble. Amongst the most serious findings, according to Meta, is that 35% of companies have no official policy regarding IM, which means that they're basically ignoring its growing use. Establishing IAM policies would be effective in controlling use, the study found. Nearly half of its respondents said that they would comply with a policy regarding the use of IAM, and 41% say they would limit personal use to emergency situations. Statistics aside, we all know that in today's world, where we're all friending each other, the lines are often blurred between work and personal life. But as long as, just remember that as long as that communication happens on a system owned by an employer, it is legally considered a liability for the employer. So how big of a problem is this? Does the inappropriate use of IAM happen amongst coworkers? Well, you might think back to October 2006, when U.S. Congressman Mark Foley resigned his seat after admitting sending offensive instant messages of a sexual nature to underage former House pages from his congressional office PC. This scandal led to media coverage, mainstream newspaper articles, warning of the risk of inappropriate IAM use in workplaces, and other negative attention that I'm sure your employers would not want. All right, so we spent about 25 minutes. I think I've overspent my time talking about where IAMs come from, how it evolved into a technology that needed regulation, and what laws would control it. So at this point, I hope you concluded that it's too risky to be in that 35% of companies that have no policy regarding the use of IAM. But you probably already realized that, given the instant nature of instant messaging, it's difficult for a company to implement a program of regulation and control because, you could theoretically park emails and inspect each manually, but how do you ensure that IAMs don't break the law or go against a company policy and not disrupt the flow of conversation between two or more parties? Well, obviously the answer is to implement an automated solution, which is what we're going to talk about next. Let's talk about what a solution should do for you. First of all, regardless of the industry you're in, whether you're using IAM to communicate to the world outside of your corporate walls, you need to archive chats to comply with the sections on discovery in the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Should your company ever be hit with a discrimination, sexual harassment, or really any type of lawsuit, you could be asked to produce records of your IAM chats. And we can't, or we didn't think about it, won't really be an acceptable answer that could lead to fines. Secondly, the chats really need to be in high fidelity. And what I mean by that is, if I tell you to chat in a chat to not break the law, but I add a little winking smiley face after the text, it means a completely different thing than if I left the smiley out. If I am a colleague and then ask them what they're doing Friday evening, and then add a question of a photograph of myself in the text, it changes the meaning completely. Because these things are now possible in instant messaging, you have to prove that they didn't happen, especially if the plaintiff is saying that they did. So high fidelity chat archiving is very important. Obviously, in the process of archiving chats, you can't stop the communication. We've already established that. If that happens, you might as well get rid of IAM to eliminate the potential problem, because eventually the employees will stop using it and just start using AOL, Yahoo, and other forms of IAM that are even harder to regulate. Now, once you're successfully archiving these chats, you need to make sure that employees can't tamper with the archives. In other words, client-side archives on an employee's desktop really won't work. They're not a good solution. Should an employee, like an administrator, access your automated solution to view the archived chats, you need to make sure you log that view, the fact that this happens, so that you can later monitor those that might be accomplices to any kind of naughtiness that might be happening. And lastly, since you're already archiving emails and in an e-discovery situation would be asked to produce all records of communication, you would ideally store the archive chats in the same system that you're archiving your email. So what else? As you see,